meeting of the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee to order. It is 2:32 p.m. Greg, would you give that a roll call?
Sure. Mr. Coy.
Here.
Mr. Van Hoek.
Here.
Here.
Mr. Colhays.
Here.
There you go. Mr. Alimi.
Present.
There he is, in from his file. Mr. Bolin.
Present.
Mr. Rudolph.
Present, Virginia.
Okay. Ms. Bunnell.
Present for Michelle.
Mr. Stitchick.
Present online.
And Mr. Rabato.
Here.
Sir, there is your quorum.
Yeah, we've got a good one. Looks like that's about all we have is just three numbers today. Wow. Maybe it's the holiday?
Maybe?
Okay. Well, you do quickly please do that public announcement. Right?
Sure. Yeah, all AMATS committee meetings are open to the public. We have a business item, a presentation by staff or a consultant. After that, the committee will be given a chance to discuss it. After the committee has discussed it, we'll allow the public to offer comments, and then they will go back to the committee for a final decision.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. Do we have a motion for approving the agenda?
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Rudolph, seconded by Ms. Newpoint. Are there any changes? No changes? Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Okay, sounds like the agenda is approved. We also have before us minutes from our last meeting. We have a motion to approve it in November 4th, 2021 minutes.
This is Ademi Halimi. I move to approve them.
Okay, thank you, William.
Second by Matt Stitchick.
Okay, approved by, motion made by Lee, seconded by Mr. Stitchick. Do we have any changes? Thank you so much for the minutes. As I was going through, I saw that you put initials because there was quite a bit of discussion, so that was really great.
Thank you.
So good job on that. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing no objections, the November 4th, 2021 minutes are approved. Moving right along, agenda item 5A, 2022-23 Unified Planning Work Program with the 2022 budget. Craig, I'm assuming this is yours.
That will be mine. So this again is the planning funds, and the narrative covers 2 years, but the budget is just a single year. You get a single year allocation through the state, and so we are able to put the budget down for 1 year. We release this for public comment. More time to go. I know it's an exciting topic. We release the narrative for public comment. The budget is not something that is required to be released for public comment, so that's here for you today, but it doesn't go out for review. So this is basically the same budget, I'm not saying much of the same narrative in terms of broken down by different elements. Our main plans and programs are in the 100 element, which is where the MTP and the TIP and UPWP are, and the public involvement plan, and the Title VI program. Those are all in there. That's the 100 element. If we do special projects, for example, in the past, the non-motorized plan is in the 200 element, as well as the Spenard Road Corridor study. This time around, we have the TDM study in there, the TISMO plan, the safety plan in there. So that's where we do a lot of the other plans that we have that aren't part of the main four. The 300 element is the air quality. Those are it's the air quality element. Those are dollars that we send to the health department, and Matt Stitchick and his crew down there, those folks down there help us with all those things. You can see it's air quality monitoring, air quality planning, and supervisions, analysis, etc. So those things are all done they're using the AMATS planning funds, but they're done by the health department folks and not the AMATS staff. The 400 element is data collection, computer modeling. The first task there, the 410 traffic and transportation data, that is led by the traffic department, by Brad Coy's group there. So that they do all the traffic counts, the hose counts out on the road, and they do those with a mixture of some federal funds from AMATS, but also a lot of property tax funds or taxpayer supported funds. And all of the ones that are non-federal funds, we capture that as our in-kind match. So, and that is, some MPOs around the country write a check for their match, but we are able to use the in-kind, which is obviously extremely helpful. They're already doing the work. We're able to capture it because we use those counts to feed our transportation model. So we ask them to do those counts and we use them to feed the model and help us with that. So that's something I was going to point out there. The other projects in there mostly done by our staff. And then the 500 element is really the program administration. We have all our admin stuff in there. We have our staff development and training. We go to conferences or do training in town, public involvement and outreach, and then people to the website, etc. The last element that's listed here is the 600 element. That's stuff that Mark, Jamie, etc. do over there at Transit. They have always in the past gotten their own separate pot of planning funds to do that sort of thing. It's kind of, we're in a state of flux right now, figuring out exactly what we're going to do. The state might be doing what's called a consolidated planning grant. And so all of those funds will come to AMATS, and then we will, of course, give them every penny of their funds because it's theirs sort of thing. We don't need to take any money off the top on that, but it's always included in the work program because these are planning funds and not construction funds. So that is a quick overview of the narrative. The budget is the next item there. That's that colorful spreadsheet, which we go to zoom in if you need to actually read any of those numbers. But the first column is the amount that would be coming to AMATS for AMATS staff and consultants. And so that's the first column there in the yellow. The next column where it says in-house personnel, that's just staff. The blue column would be if we have some small contracts in there. So we have a modeling support contract in there. We have some public involvement and outreach that we're looking at possibly doing some a safety campaign related to non-motorized stuff. We're thinking about doing that there. The following column at the top, it says FHWAPL funds, the DOT planning. Those funds are going to, I'll probably get it wrong, Todd can correct me with the central region or the Anchorage field office, etc., for the work that James Sarzik does for related to AMATS. So that's making sure that they're supported as well, because again, AMATS is not just the city, AMATS is the city and the state. So that's what that column is for. Most of the rest of the columns are just federal planning funds that need to be shown in this document. There's some column where the 800,000 for the MTP is showing in there. That's TIP funds, but a lot of that's planning funds. That's not construction funds. So that's what that column shows. The money down there for the signal timing and the TEM study, etc., are in there. You'll see some of the transit funds. They're 5303 and 5307 funds that they receive. If they receive them here, there is the match. All the way out there, you'll see a column that says MOA operating in-kind match. That again is the data counts. And then the next column is the MOA transit local match, so they're matching their planning funds. That's a brain dump. Just gave you all of that. So what we're asking you to do, again, the narrative went out for the review. We didn't receive any comments on that. The budget is not required to go out for the review. We are asking for you to recommend both of these to the policy committee for approval so that we can hit the ground running January 1st and continue to plan for the good people of Anchorage. Transportation stuff.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay.
Were there any major changes from 2021 budget?
The only real change is the fact that we finished with the non-motorized plan, we finished with Spinard Road, so they're not in there, but we added in safety plan and the TDM study and the physical plan. So that's really good. That's the main change.
If you
You have a comment online, someone, or on the?
just moving, if you're ready for a motion, there's a comment about that.
Okay, let's go through questions first, and then we'll move to the meeting. And so one of the motions that I have is, I was looking through the write-up, and it had mentioned that the street technology is going to be hired to a consultant.
It's going to be what?
It's going to be hired out to a consultant.
Yeah.
And then on the budget, it looks like there's no funds.
Yeah, so,
How does that work?
so what that is, if you remember the CRISA funds, the coronavirus relief funds that we've talked about a few times, those are 100% federal share, so there's no match required. And one of the biggest challenges that we have with the federal funds when it comes to planning projects is we can't bond for it. The bond council will not allow us to use those for just a planning project. They will only allow you to use bond funds for a project if you're going to build something. If you do a plan and it's going to build something based as part of funding that, then yeah, you could. But otherwise, you can't use the bond funds to cover the match, the local match. So it's super challenging for the planning department to try and come up with the money. And so we're typically doing in-kind match. And when you have in-kind match for Spinard, and you have in-kind match for non-motorized, and you have in-kind match for freight, and you start chewing it up pretty quickly. So the benefit of those CRISA funds is that they don't require a match. So the plan is to put that street typology project into the next step and use the CRISA funds. That's going to be our suggestion. So we won't have to worry about the match. You'll also see that the safety plan has a little bit of funds in there. That's for staff time, but we're going to hopefully fund that also with the CRISA fund, so we don't have to try and figure out how to come up with a match. We've gotten better at finding the in-kind match, but when we started to get to the point where realizing we can't come up with this, we had projects languishing for months and months and months as we're trying to figure out, can the transit department cover a little bit of match? Can we get something out of traffic? Is someone at PM&E able to do this? And it's just super challenging. So it's an extremely long-winded answer to say, the reason why you don't see them there is that we're going to add those later. And so we'll have to do an amendment to this, but that's why it's just, yeah.
So you're still planning on using consultants this budget just to show that because you're not sure that you can do all that?
Yeah, well, we don't, until the policy committee approves the dollar figures in there, we can't do it. So
Okay.
we know that Joni will be able to, she'll be able to get started with the drafting the Torah and getting an RFP ready.
This gives her funds to do that work.
To do that stuff. And then when it gets, we get a consultant on board, that's going to be funds to help her work with that project, manage the project. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Are there any questions from the public? Can we get any questions from them over the, okay, any members of the policy committee? Are there anyone in the policy committee on that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so it looks like we're ready to move on to accept the motion that Christine put on in the chat. She moves to recommend adoption of the 2022-2023 UPWP to the policy committee with the narrative as written with proposed and element budget allocation set by staff. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Seconded by Mr. Macro. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Now on to agenda item 5B, the 2023 to 2026 proposed tip criteria.
All right, this is a big fun one. Should take 5-10 minutes.
Let's not go through every single comment in detail.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So you have a memo here quickly talking about the criteria. Again, the tip is the 4-year, what are we actually doing in the next 4 years? If you have the UPWP as what is staff going to do next year and the next year after that, and you have the MTP, which is the 20-year, what are we going to do with all the sources of funds in Anchorage, federal bond, et cetera. The tip is the 4-year, what are we going to actually do in those projects? So every time we redo them, we look at the criteria to see what we can do to tweak them, get them compliant with the latest federal authorization bill, et cetera. This time around, we did a much more in-depth look at these criteria. If you remember, some of you may remember this, I know Todd remembers because he was there. We were updating the criteria and we got to the very tail end and the policy committee, some policy committee members said, well, we want to do all these changes. And we said, well, we really need to get this thing done so we can move forward. Can we let those changes sit and then we'll do a really long version of looking at these. So they agreed, and that's what this was. It was a 1.5-year version of looking at the criteria, looking at criteria around the country, trying to steal the best ones that we can find. And here's what we came up with. We put those are the criteria that we came up with, a little bit a different version, but there it is. And then we released those for double our normal comment period for 60 days public review. We received these 139 comments. As far as I can remember, that's the most we've received for a tip criteria before. I know we've received more, we've received a lot for the non-motorized plan, so it's not the most we've ever had for any document, but I think it's the most for the criteria. And so you can see the different categories. We have 5 main categories of the criteria, and you can see the breakdown of comments by criteria. Christine created this really nice infographic, is what I'm going to call it, to kind of reflect that information in a little more graphical and user-friendly way. You can see the kind of the breakdown of 17% where in the general category, looks like about 19% in the economic category. You can see all those there. But that kind of helps you get a sense of what the public was commenting on and where they were focusing on. A little bit of everything, really. And the least amount, really, I guess, is commenting on the preservation criteria. So you can answer questions about that. If not, let's go forward to the actual comments. So didn't number the pages, but again, 139 comments. A lot. My suggestion is we go page by page, and hopefully, I'm sure that everyone, since you got these a week ago, you studied these in detail and you made all your notes. So we can look at page 1, and you could say, are there any questions or comments or thoughts on page 1? And if not, we'll go to page 2. And then once we get through all of them, we can come back and say, make a motion to recommend approval with the following changes, and if you had changes. Basically, what we've done is we have a name or an organization that has commented, telling you which criteria, and then which criteria too. So you have the main criteria is safety, and then here's criteria 1, cruise truck related safety issue, and there's criteria 2, that's still in the safety category. Then you have the actual comment, and then you have the staff response. So in a lot of the cases, we definitely recommended no change. It doesn't mean we're right, but that's what staff recommended. And that's obviously why you are here, to look at those things and say, actually, we agree with the comment, not with staff, or whatever you want to do. So I think it makes sense to do it page by page as opposed to going through each one, because you do have a fundamental time. But you could also just say, staff's got to be right, so let's just move the whole thing. But I'm not going to presuppose that.
It looks like you organized them by the criteria, the main criteria, so going page to page, the first page would be all the safety comments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mobility.
You go with safety, then the mobility, and all of them. And there certainly are some general comments in here that were, you don't have to, there's no, they weren't asking for a change, so I'm happy to do it however you folks would like.
Any members of the committee have feedback on page 1?
This is Matt Strichik. noticed several comments regarding safe routes to schools and safe, well, giving safe routes to schools credit in projects. I'm wondering if those potentially qualify for the 2 bonus points under pedestrian safety for improving HSIP or Vision Zero high injury sites.
Well, if you're, can you point out which one you're referring to?
I'll take, for example, number 14.
Yeah, that one is nothing in this proposed criteria to promote school zone safety. Some schools have no designated school zones with safe walking routes to school, therefore there's no crash data that would qualify potential school zones for safety improvements. The only schools that don't have designated school zones with safe walking routes to schools are private schools or charter schools. If you're a neighborhood school, they have a safe route to school. They have a designated walking route. But if you're like a Woodbury charter school or Aquarium, there's no walking route because kids come from all over the city. It's pretty hard to make a walking route to that. So that's why if it's not doesn't have a designated school zone, that's the reason why it doesn't have it. So I guess we believe that the pedestrian safety points that are in here should take care of the issue, but we're happy to it's up to the committee to recommend the policy.
One idea potentially to factor in is criteria, improves pedestrian safety criteria. It has a bonus point that says improves pedestrian safety at HSIP under Vision Zero high injury network location. We could add that to say HSIP Vision Zero high injury network location and or a safe routes to school route.
I guess what you're saying is give it points if it's included on a safe walking route to school.
Right. That would be.
Well, I think the comment was though that there are facilities that don't have a designated safe route. So adding that comment doesn't solve that particular concern.
Yeah, and again, the only ones that don't have a designated walking route are ones that are not in neighborhood schools.
Right.
So I don't know how you could possibly.
But I guess I'm curious what constitutes a HSIP or Vision Zero high injury network location. Is that 2, 4? How many serious injuries?
I don't have the exact answer on either one of those. I know the Vision Zero plan includes listings of the high injury locations and
Yeah, so the HSIP, it identifies locations.
Yeah.
Vision Zero identifies locations. So these are separate projects, separate plans, separate efforts that have regular updates usually. And the Safe Routes to School map, walking map, is something that we update every year as well from the traffic department. So we have documented walking routes and they're available to the public. And so for any school that is in the Anchorage area, and I know that ASD, I don't know if some of the, probably not some of the other charter schools, but at least the Anchorage school district ones have safe routes to school identified where the walking routes are.
I mean, to me, the point of this category is to give points to projects that are in locations that have some sort of issue already. So it doesn't, I guess it doesn't make sense to staff to give points to a project that's in a designated walking zone of a school, because it doesn't mean there's any issue with that area around the school. It just means that's where you folks in traffic have got together and said, hey, kids are going to walk this way, they can come from the neighborhood, but we should be putting the points into the locations that are known injury issues or safety issues, and we could put our money to help deal with that issue.
The likelihood is that somewhere that would be an ideal safe route to school route, but doesn't have the facilities would show up probably in Vision Zero or
You would think.
which is true. So these other two projects are identifying issue locations, whereas the San Jose school map is not doing quite the same. So I see where you're coming from.
So I guess in that case, that's why we recommended no change. Thought it was covered already and had real good points for that, so.
Because there are so many of those comments, can we explain that? Like, is that worth it? There's quite a few.
More than what staff's response was over here.
Perhaps.
Add more of my mouth to it. Yeah,
I
we
think
can.
when you just explained it, because I was having the same concern, the way you just explained it
Okay.
made a lot of sense.
Okay. We can do that, absolutely.
Maybe the way to do it would be, rather than addressing each comment with a separate explanation, if there was a quick summary, and here's some things that we saw quite a bit of, and have a quick bullet point that says, hey, for the level of pedestrian safety, if it's on identified issue location, it's addressed in kind of a general one-page response. Would that be?
Well, so what we're trying to do, I mean, this is the comment response summary, and the idea is this is what we're going to end up with. So we have to figure out what if there's language that we would want to add in here that would help clarify this, because this, you know, this is not what's going to go out on the street and ask people to put in projects. We're going to have the criteria and nomination forms that are built that match that sort of thing. So,
And there was a handbook that I remember Aaron presented.
yeah, that's for the tip criteria, exactly.
So that's kind of an intro to this.
Right.
Right.
And I think sometimes we recommend that's where we'll put some of the languages in that little handbook. So we could add it there.
That'd probably be the best place to do it. And I recall Aaron mentioning that there were going to be potential reformatting of that handbook.
Yeah.
Because it was fairly rough. He was throwing together kind of towards the end, you know, realizing it was a good idea.
Yeah, we've never had that before, and clearly it was a good idea. And he just kind of slapped that together pretty fast, and it was great on such short notice. So
Yeah.
we can do that. We can work that.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right.
Will that be ready in time for the Boston meeting? Okay.
Probably do that. Probably should be first. I'll promise you I'll do that. He's not here.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So we move on to the second page, it sounds like. Any other comments? Any comments on page 2?
On 23, the staff response to a comment about supporting non-single occupant vehicle travel. Specifically the comment, shifting away from single occupancy vehicles is a broad goal and needs to be more specific and measurable. Is it too late to try to figure that out? Does it make sense to figure out what could be more specific and measurable?
It's a little challenging to try to figure out how to measure this project will shift more people away from single occupancy vehicle.
Right.
It's really hard to measure, I don't think. I don't know. I mean, it has a really high things on that. Even not so really high things on that. That was kind of our challenge as staff, is you try to think, yeah, it's a good goal, but measuring it, making it to the point where you can measure that is a challenge, because that's what we're always being asked to do by the sector to show, okay, here's your project, how are you gonna, here's the criteria, how is it actually gonna score that, and how are you gonna measure that that's a 3 or a 4? That was why we responded that way, I guess. I guess I'm happy to try and look at it if someone has some other ideas on it. I just think it's a little challenging to measure. Very
Do you know of anyone else who's doing it?
Well, again, this was a 1.5 year thing where we looked around the country for all sorts of things, so there may be some other entities that do that, but it would be, you know, Boston, Chicago, or Houston that has 100 staff. $1 billion future revenue.
Maybe that is aspirational for
There's
future
a good term for that.
criteria.
Yeah.
And maybe versus it being a tip, that's where the MTP and some of those other long planning spots finance play a key role. And if those identify some of that, these are the projects that will make the biggest difference in moving towards non-motorized or non-single vehicles. But we don't have that right now. Do you have something like?
I was just gonna add on that I think that the outcome is reducing single occupancy vehicle travel, but you do that by making the pedestrian network better, the bicycle network, the transit network. Like that's how you do it, and I think that's how what's scored in the tip criteria. So I think it is covered. But I do support comment number 25, kind of on the same mood, that instead of saying supports non-single occupancy vehicle travel, it would reduce the dependence of vehicle travel, because I think that does get you a little bit more measurable, because it talks about maybe like gaps in sidewalks, access to transit, ways that you can get around without relying on your vehicle. I do like that wording a little better.
So at the end where it says supports non-single occupant vehicle travel, to change it to reduce dependence on vehicle travel?
Yeah.
Okay. That could be a recommended change there. I don't have any issue with that. That's just in the language of the drop, so it's a good point, but it's not, you're not sitting there trying to figure out how to measure it. Right. Overall.
I mean, they both kind of say
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
So far, that's the one change you identified.
Yeah.
And so when we make the motion to approve, we'll
Yeah.
include that.
Well, I would add this, they brought the school language in the handbook.
Or, but we're not seeing the handbook, so I'm not sure what it does or doesn't have.
Gotcha.
So I don't know how that would be part of the motion necessarily. I think that's just a request.
Well, I think you can throw that in your recommendation as well.
Okay.
You can-
Those are the two things that will include in the motion at the moment. Are you ready to move on to page 3? Any other comments? Okay, let's move on to page 3. Still some mobility and now into economic.
Yeah. Just a comment responding to comments 49 and 50 about reducing transit vehicle delay. I think this is another instance where maybe we are kind of saying the same thing, but in different words, and reducing transit delay is a pretty technical term that we use in our industry a lot that is pretty definable, but it's not as uplifting as, making it more competitive with a car. Like, it's kind of like a negative statement versus so I just want to clarify that I think we're accomplishing the same thing, because transit delay is, reducing congestion. It's talking about transit reentry on the roads from pullouts, passenger boardings, roadway facilities, intersection approaches. And like the best way that this city can really help make transit competitive is by preemptive transit signals, prioritization. So I think that that's really what we're getting at. We're just not to the point where we're going to have like transit only lanes right now. So I think that we are still accomplishing the goals that these two comments are addressing, in my opinion. No changes. Just wanted to make sure that you weren't ignoring that.
One of the things that I noticed looking through is that some of the things asked for are beyond our ability right now or tools to accomplish. And so I wonder if it'd be a valuable exercise to go through and list some of the things that are aspirational tools to think about ways that we could develop through future projects or MPP or whatnot.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I mean, the normal course of business here is that we get these criteria and we get the nomination forms out, we put out the call for nominations, and then we start ranking and scoring projects, and we start to realize, well, that's not really working like we wanted, and so we have to write the notes down there and know that that one needs to be changed next time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's for the criteria, not necessarily, knowing that how do we measure a certain transit delay or whatever, and how are we going to, when is that going to come about, when is we're going to have the right data here or whatever, and so knowing that that's aspirational, we're going to do that. So, I guess it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility of putting something in the back of that handbook about here's some aspirational goals for the future, so we have a catalog somewhere.
I think that there's some really good comments in here that would be a great way to capture them with that recognition of being aspirational. I think given that we haven't reviewed all of those in detail, at this time if it's presented not as we're recommending all of these be done, but these have been identified as some potential options.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not even something that needs to be approved by the policy committee. In other words, if you folks start thinking of those things, and just let us know. We can include them in there, not too much room to start. Anytime something comes up, you can just let AMATS know, hey, here's something I read about in a magazine, or I heard about this at a conference or whatever. And that's why we go to training, get the latest grades, steal stuff from other people. That's what it's there for. Okay.
Okay, page 4.
On page 4, number 71, I was hoping somebody could explain how the special land use offset for Eagle River would function.
Something that Aaron always answers, but and I don't know from the right grouping here. I know that in the Eagle River, the 2040 land use plan, there is stuff, there's language in there about the special land use features in Eagle River, and I think the idea would just be you'd get some points if it was in that special Eagle River land use, whatever it is, the offset there. So I think they're just saying let's add some points in there to capture the fact that it's in the land use plan map and do this here. So Sorry, I don't have a better answer than that. I think it's just a reflection of the map, the comp plan map has that in there, and we would just try to capture that in here somehow. That part of the criteria. Under land use, it has, 4 points for Anchorage, 2 points for Anchorage, Chigac, and then it's added to the points, I guess.
On number 69 and several others, just clarification as to what that comment means from staff.
Okay, so you see the thing that says add points for projects in a specific neighborhood plan or any adopted plan. And we, weren't sure if they're saying, well, here's this plan from 1982 and it mentioned this road project here, so do we get some extra points for that? Or should we say it's just the last 5 years or last 10 years? So we're just asking for some, we're happy to do whatever you folks want, but we're asking for some clarification. Do you want to have a time limit on that, or to say if it was ever in a plan somewhere, someone found it and they get some points for it? So that's kind of what we're just, being technical staff, we're just kind of limited on what we're thinking there. So asking for your thoughts on 5, 10, 2, last 2 years, whatever you want. And then the policy committee. Listen to your recommendation.
Feels arbitrary to throw out a number, and I also feel like going 10 years or, I don't know, something a little bit broad.
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, the trails plan is from sometime in the 90s. So it's pretty ancient, but there isn't a recreational trails plan except for that right now. It's pretty darn old, needs to be updated. We're trying to, that's another thing we're thinking of for the Christmas fund to update that, but should it get points if there's a project that's been in there for 20 years? I don't know. It seems a little old, stale, but they got put on a map at some point. Someone thought it was a good idea.
I imagine from some of the different discussions that I've been a part of this, that there is desire that when a neighborhood plan identifies how they want the neighborhood to look, that projects not come in and do something different, but really acknowledge and try to help accomplish what the visions are. So as I read that comment, that's what I'm thinking of. And so the question that comes to my mind is there a good way to accomplish that? Will that already be getting accomplished by how this is? And so maybe not doing the specific thing that they're requesting of you, but are we already meet the spirit of the law?
Well, I mean, in the criteria in years past, we've had, is it an adopted plan? I think it's 2 points, 3 points, whatever. And it's just any adopted plan ever sort of thing. And that's why we're trying to tighten it up by saying, well, let's just say 5 to 10 years. So that this project that has been in a plan for 15, 20 years, but has never gone anywhere, there may be some reason why it's never gone anywhere, still get points for it. Should it still be getting some points even if it's ancient? I don't know.
Maybe if
So
it's
5 to 10 years is what I suggest.
maybe if it's not a good project, it will not score well on the other areas. They might get a few points, and so what? Maybe other projects will make a difference if how other projects like right at the top.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things I always try to reinforce about the criteria. Is you got to keep in mind that to not get tunnel vision and just look at, well, we're talking about truck-related safety issue, and we're focusing on just the right amount of points, because there are a bunch of other criteria where a project can get points in, even if it doesn't score well here, and it might still bubble to the top. We used to have a criteria that all it was what functional class is it? And, if you're an arterial, you always got those points. Does it make sense that just because it's that certain size, it's getting more points, just because it carries more traffic? So we took that out. It's not in there anymore. It just didn't make sense. But, there's some criteria that are just in there forever, and you just focus on that one and not think there are a lot of other possibilities, as you said, to get points somewhere else, even if it doesn't get a lot of points here. So,
Is there a comment online?
There's a hand, Luke has his hand up.
Go ahead, Luke.
Hey, I was just wondering, maybe instead of a time range there, if we said adopted plans with a relevant or justified need.
who gets to define justice?
Yeah.
Who's defining?
It's
the
tough to,
Yeah. It's kind of like we used to have the criteria that says you get X amount of points for improving quality of life. Well, you're improving your quality of life might be different than mine. I mean, I might get points for, it's right next to transit. You might get more points because it's on a bike lane. So it's hard to say is it a justified need based on whose decision. And they're all arbitrary to a degree, but if we were to say, if you just say 5 to 10 years, it's been in the adopted plan in the last 5 years, plan that was adopted in the last 5 to 10 years, at least it gives you some cutoff. And again, it's just one criteria. I have however many pages you have there. Criteria.
My only issue with the 5 to 10 year time frame is that a lot of plans need to be updated, and they're not updated because of staff time, and money, and funding. But the needs are probably still there. I mean, as a planner, you spend so much time and money developing these plans and talking to the community, getting all their ideas, and there's millions and millions of dollars of projects that they're never going to get to in like 5 years, but there's still needs. And I don't want to discount that just because we haven't had the time or money to go back and update that neighborhood plan or something like that.
Otherwise, it's giving priority
To the newer one.
to the MTP
Yeah.
and others versus some of these neighborhood plans.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I like the idea of encouraging consistency with the planning work, that gives a nod to the fact that someone came up with this plan, someone did all this planning work, and so there should be, I mean, it's like my wife says, I'm working on the house, she says, can you get it done today, you know? I don't want you to start into something you can't finish, I want to work on the project, get it done, and so like, if it's in a plan, it's had a lot of thought in it, it's nice to actually get those things done.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, we have such a robust, effort that goes into creating the MTP, and that theoretically is the group of projects that we really want. And so that's adopted every 4 years. So if it's a project that the community really wants and it's inside that MTP, you're going to get points there for it being in there. Most of the non-motorized projects are in the current non-motorized plan. Maybe some that are in the Area-Wide Trails plan from the 90s that aren't in there, but those are usually, here's a little cut through between two houses that we really want this little thing. And when you develop that subdivision, you don't put something across there, but for the most part, the well-known major non-motorized facilities are in the non-motorized plan just adopted, so you'll get points in there. All the road projects, and they're in there in the MTP, so you're going to get those points. It's just going to, leave out some really old plans. It probably won't leave out a lot, but it's just an arbitrary number.
I think there needs to be some kind of sideboards onto these things, because typically the older plans don't have any fiscal constraint. And so there's billions of dollars in these plans that you're never, ever going to get to. And if you include every plan and every project these things have to have some stuff. I think part of the planning recommendations moving forward is all plans should have some type of fiscal constraint, so that would maybe prevent some of these things from getting super stale because they've been in the same plan for 20, 30 years and you're still working on the same plan. Because if you are developing plans that have fiscal constraints, the idea is you'll eventually run out of that plan and you get one, which will force you to redo the plan.
Yeah.
At least it forces a priority.
Yeah. So if you want to put a number on here, great. If not, it just goes to the policy committee and they can decide if they want to do it.
What do you think about, is it good with what we've got? Yeah, and the current projects, current plans that have projects in them, those are going to be the easiest to be submitting. So it's really most likely the ones that are going to show up with a lot of good content and score well. So by default, they're going to score the best. So I think let's leave it like this. If possibly wants to That's what I'm thinking about. Open other thoughts, anyone else wants to present that right now? Okay, let's go to the next page then. Go ahead.
There's the issue of asking for clarification on what would be a greenhouse gas emission reduction. And I like the comment from staff about adding an example of projects that can reduce greenhouse gases. There's, like, without knowing what that example is, there's another comment about how expanding road capacity will likely lead to emissions increases. And so maybe the comment or the example could be something along those lines. Because I just agree, like usually when you're expanding roads, it means more traffic in the future.
Or it could decrease if you have congestion and traffic is sitting there idling and you expand it and now it's moving at 35 or 45 miles an hour, you would have less.
I guess if it's in like large intersections and stuff like that, then yeah. Which, you know, we are in a city, so there's probably a lot of that. I guess I don't think I have a specific recommendation on there. It's, yeah, I don't know. It feels a little arbitrary. I think that's good. I think the staff recommendation, you know, we'll see what they come out with for the example, but I think it's usually pretty obvious.
Yeah, I know, for example, that all the work that was done that you might notice in Tudor, since that's the way I go home, have for the last 18 years, that's gotten a lot better with all the work that was done with lanes, and turn pockets, and all that sort of stuff. So adding lanes there,
Right.
I used to sit through 3 or 4 lights, and now it doesn't matter what time of day, late at night, it's still usually just one light. It's gotten much better. And that's one of the first things I learned when I got here was the air quality issues don't relate to having a bunch of cars drive by. It's having a bunch of cars waiting because you're stuck at a light. So, so clearly there are sometimes when you're adding lanes that it helps, but as you said, that's at a big intersection. So I guess we'll just have to work on trying to find some examples of projects that can help reduce those things and add them in the handbook.
Well, an example could be traffic signals, which are now shown to reduce
Sure.
emissions.
Reducing severe injuries.
Yeah.
Okay.
We eliminate left-hand turns.
How they think you're going in circles with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments on page 5? Okay, thank you.
For 104, do we think that all of those proposals are super prescriptive?
Look over those again. We're talking about environmental impacts, and we are getting pretty prescriptive. I don't know. I guess I was thinking you can't capture everything, but I mean, you could, but it'd be a really long criteria.
Yeah.
So,
Craig, is question 104 an opportunity to maybe flesh out our handbook on applying these criteria? Because she makes some good points there.
I guess the thought from staff was, if you get to, I mean, you can get very prescriptive, but it seemed like, talking about, the criteria talks about having an impact of right-of-way, wetlands, property, or environmentally sensitive areas. All of this is covered under there. We don't usually get that prescriptive in the criteria itself, but we could, I mean, we could add a laundry list of a lot of things for a lot of these different criteria back in the handbook, but all of these things here in this list, as far as I know, these are things that when someone is designing and permitting and all that sort of stuff, they're required to look at all this stuff. So that's already going to be looked at when an AMATS funded project goes through the system, because the federally funded projects require to follow NEPA. It's going to look at all that. That's, I'm not an engineer, but that's my understanding of it. So I think you can write it all out here, but it's already taken care of.
Yeah, I would agree with that point. These are all things we're going to be looking at during the project development process. So if you want to eliminate a project before you get to project development, just because you've already kind of started the project development in this whole process.
Well, and some of it is actually included in like environmental impacts.
Which having a little bit of a summary and not a thorough assessment, but kind of more judgment call makes sense early on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always look at this and think, keeping in mind that we're a planning entity and we're doing, kind of generalized planning. We're looking to get new projects to put into our funding stream and using criteria to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and get the top ones and plug them in if we need to, if we can, if we have the funding. And then the process can start, and the engineers and designers at DOT can look at those things and start going through the thing. And if they get to that and they realize there's so many environmental issues in this area and wetlands, et cetera, that it just doesn't make sense to do this, that's when that's supposed to happen, as opposed to presupposing it here when we're doing the criteria. I'm not a wetlands expert. I'm not an expert in any of that.
Well, and that's the point. You don't know.
No.
Unless you're an environmental expert. Are
Right.
these impacts that you're considering, are they going to be enough to
Right.
stop this project?
Right.
Or are they not? So it should be evaluated through the environmental process, not at the pre-planning.
Yes, the planning process.
Good point. It's a far more detailed analysis, yeah.
I think we update the staff response to allude to that would be helpful. Instead of saying it's prescriptive, say these are items that would be considered part of the project development. And anyone else wants to add kind of what the language includes? questions on this page? No, okay, let's turn to page 7. These look like a lot of the general comments that were included probably at the start of the list. But
Yep. Yeah. That's why they're all in there. I mean,
one of the
they're
ones,
after them though.
one of the ones that was made is number 129, where it asks about testing the scoring criteria in multiple projects. And it jogged my memory that I think we'd asked about that as well. Is that something that?
Yeah, we did that. We did that early on with the criteria. Aaron and I did ranked. We ranked 3 road projects and 2 non-motorized using the old criteria and the new criteria. And when we did that, they kind of settled out about the same. But it you know, I think the new criteria reflect a lot of the things that we wanted to do, even if the projects came out in a similar location. It didn't wildly swing the numbers. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I haven't really thought about it,
But a few examples, it's a little bit harder to tell. It makes sense that it would be similar.
yeah.
It seems like when you got 100, that's when you'll really see the difference, but it's not that you can.
Well, my experience has been, and I've done these criteria for a while, and I've also helped and ranked a lot of projects for the CIP for years and years. And it's really hard to get a sense of it until you really start doing it. And then you start, I mean, Mark's done this a whole bunch too, James has done it a lot. You start to do these and you start realizing, oh, we need a 0 here. Why did we forget to put a 0 in there? Why didn't they put it in whatever? So once you start doing them a lot, and just a few, you're not really able to tell, but you really got to get into it, and then you write down your notes, and then the next time you do, you realize, yeah, we said we were going to change it, we're going to change that sort of thing. But it really takes a lot. Goes a lot.
But also the scoring is not the end all be all, you know, you can jump around on scores. You don't pick the top scoring project and that's fine. You have the opportunity, if you see an outlier, it doesn't make sense, you can adjust it as the committee, or the policy committee can go down in order and pick what they want.
Yeah, I mean, 4 years ago, one of the top ranking projects was Northern Access to Bend, because when you look at the criteria, they ranked and scored very well. You give points to a project that has a pedestrian pathway on one side and improved non-motorized facilities. You can't not give a point. So that's where it went, and the technical committee got it, and they said, it doesn't matter what we think about the project, it could be supportive, could be against it, but that's what the criteria says. And the policy committee came and said, hey, thanks for your time. We're going to take that off the list, and then we're going to have this other one that we like more. And that's That is the way these were set up, policy or NPOs were set up. Because it is indeed just one part of the program. There's the criteria, how much funding you have, what's the time frame. You don't want to have every hillside road being built and worked on at the same time, so there's that schedule. And then what the politicians want to do with it. And obviously, that's the only change that happened. Otherwise, they followed the recommendations of the staff and technical committee right to the number, except for that one project. And we go down and move on up.
Yeah, and it can be dangerous actually if you go adjust your criteria to get the projects that you want to get the top. So
I'm going to suggest that's a really bad idea.
I think testing it too much, like new projects. Yeah. So.
I mean, I had a lot of people very angry with me for doing that as staff. Like, well, wouldn't you rather, not have any personal feelings on it and be completely transparent? That's what staff is supposed to do. Take the numbers that you guys give us, here's the criteria, and just go. And it makes it clear. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Okay, any other questions, comments on page 7? Anything minutes there? Let's go contact the lead. Okay, let's go to page 8. Any questions on page 8? The 136, where they were asking for, or it mentioned lack of any explanatory introduction. Did they not have the certain criteria, or maybe overlooked it, didn't realize, or?
It was posted along with the criteria at the same time, so. And again, we haven't done it before, so we're seeing that as an option, but it was there.
Okay. And then comment 132 talks about, makes comment that tree acne liver at the side look to be in contention. What were the thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, which part?
132.
My thoughts on
Tree acne liver not being in contention and the tip being weighted towards the acreage.
all I can tell you is over the 18 years, the different times that I've done the exercise to look at the percentage of funding that has gone to Chugach River, matching up with the actual population of those areas, the percentage of funding was always higher than the population. That's just one measure, but they certainly have received a decent amount of funds over the years. It's certainly cyclical. We've done a lot recently, and maybe the last 8 years or so, but maybe not just very recently. But we, as staff, we look at recommending projects that can be delivered that don't have the areas that we know have giant wetlands issues or whatever no-goes that might be there. We try to balance these out equitably and fairly, so everyone gets $700. And lives in the river, so
Yeah.
he cares about how he gets out there. So yeah, I mean, it's a common complaint, and we always try to make sure everyone's getting something and we spread it around based on the needs and all that sort of stuff. So
Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, I don't.
Any other questions or comments on the last page? Anyone online have questions or comments? Okay, so we've gone through all of those. Anything else current to go through?
That's it from us.
Do you have any comments from the public? Anyone online, any comments? Okay, so looks like it's up to the committee now. I've noted 4 things that we've talked about. Number 1 being the safe routes to school discussion, making sure the handbook addresses that. Make sure the handbook also includes a list of ideas, potential aspirations. Doesn't say that these are for sure, but just lists them as a reference of things that could be considered. Making this the change to comment 25, mobility goal language, and then revising the response in comment 104 that I noted.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
So, do we have a motion?
I'll move to forward for recommendations to the policy committee the 2023 to 2026 tip criteria with the 4 changes that you just mentioned.
Perfect. Wait a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Who's going to start it off?
Guys, for lack of. You're letting anyone have some glory, right? Thank you.
Are there any objections to the proposed motion? Okay, motion is approved. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Craig, for helping us move through that. Yeah,
There's a lot of comments.
it is.
I know you folks are all extremely busy, so getting through these in your free time is challenging, I get it.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us some time. I think when I think it's helpful. I think unfortunately this will be hard to complete today.
I also suggest that if you look through these, if you want to have some more of your spare time to look at it, you can see something that stands out to you, just let us know. And we can share that with the policy committee, but I think you guys got most of it. You did it, or it's good.
Perfect. Okay, let's look at the agenda. Are there any other action items? Those are the 2.
That's it.
And then we don't have anything showing up for projects and plat updates or general information, unless I'm mistaken.
We could, we don't have it listed, but we could just mention that the MTP 2050 went out for public review starting yesterday for a 30-day public review on the goals and objectives. It's on our website, and then it's on, there's a website specifically for the 2050 MTP.
Okay. Was that the one that we can't see it?
You can see it now.
We can.
Yes.
For a while.
Yep.
Awesome, that's great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Tell the team that's great, and we're excited to see what the public's comments are. Any other general information and items? Okay, then we can move on to the public. We got public comments on here. Oh, committee comments. Item number 8, committee comments. Anyone on the committee have something to ask?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do it, but I'm not a committee member, but
Not yet.
not yet, but this will be my last meeting for the TAC for the, as the AMATS coordinator. I've been fortunate to be asked to be the planning director to take over Michelle's position, so I will attempt to not mess that up. She's done a great job of putting it in good stead. So next Wednesday, I'll start acting. Well, I've been acting for a long time, but I'll start in the acting planning director position. For the time being, we'll have Aaron filled. To be that, so I'll have a seat on the committee, so that should be fun. And I'll be at the policy committee next in 2 weeks, since Aaron doesn't really do too much and help that. But so it's been a great run, and I'm excited for this next step. So still have my fingers in the air. That's fine. So
Yeah, thanks. It'll be sad to see Michelle go. She's been great to have, so.
definitely will be flight staff's gain. So it'll be good for her.
When is she going?
She will be here next Tuesday, and that's her last day. She's got a couple weeks of time, getting stuff packed up and all that sort of stuff, and then I think she starts sometime in January down there. So, that's where she went to grad school, so she has some runway. I think she said 12 or 13 years ago, whatever she graduated. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be great to have you on this side of that.
Careful what you wish for. Everything's buried.
Other any comments? Yeah.
Christine Banal has her hand up.
Okay, go Christine.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say congrats to Craig. And I'm only standing in for Michelle for one meeting, and I think you'll get Craig back after he gets into the new job there. So anyway, thank you for letting me participate today.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to number 9, public comments. Any comments from the public that are shown? Okay, sounds like we're ready to gavel out then. So thank you for your participation. Our meeting is adjourned at 3:50.
A lot of comments.